Good afternoon, everyone. Uh, so I'm Mike Maglio, and welcome to NU at Noon. Um, so one of my passions in life is genealogy, and this is a shameless plug for my company, which I do on the side. So here we are. We're going to talk about how to research your ancestry, and it's my take. Everybody might say something a little bit differently, but this is how I view what you need to do in today's age to start researching your ancestry. But first, a little bit about me. Uh, I'm a graduate, Northeastern, class of '89. I have a degree in chemical engineering, but over the years, I keep reinventing myself from engineer to IT guy. My current profession is IT program manager. I have also a Northeastern certificate in knowledge management. And I'm a third generation genealogist, sort of. So I've been doing genealogy for 30 plus years, and I picked it up from my father-in-law, who probably was doing genealogy for 30 years before me, and he picked it up from his aunt, who had started that family's genealogy at the turn of the century, 1900. So like I said, I've been doing this for 30 plus years, but I've also been spending the last decade working in DNA for genealogy. So I combine all of that as I'm talking today. But first, I'm going to get up on my soapbox, do a little public service announcement. I want to reinforce the fact that we are all cousins. In fact, if we all had our DNA done tomorrow and I were to look at it, I could tell you exactly how we are cousins. There's no such thing as race as we think of it. There is just a spectrum of colors, all dependent on where your ancestors happen to migrate. There's no such thing as racial purity. We are all mutts. This is an example of my ethnicity. This is 14 different ethnicities based on my DNA out of a test of 36. And I can guarantee you everybody will have a very large number of slices of pie and not one color. In fact, there's not even such a thing as species purity. The more we learn about DNA, the more we learn that we're standing on the shoulders of our other hominid ancestors. So as an example, I'm 4% Neanderthal and 1.5% Denisovan, and I'm probably even a little bit of something they haven't even named yet. All right, I can get off my soapbox now. And now to some tongue-in-cheek. The 10 Commandments of Genealogy. First thing, you need to have a goal in genealogy. Large or small, it doesn't matter, but you need to work towards something. You need to be flexible because the world is changing. So you need to change as the world changes. I think my biggest takeaway from my education at Northeastern was my ability to adapt and change. And as you saw in my About Mike, I've recreated my career multiple times. I can flex with the world, and you need to be able to flex with the world. Absolutely get your DNA tested. And you may have concerns, and I'll approach those concerns later. Be prepared to fix and build trees. Be prepared to build someone else's tree. Be prepared to fix them. One of my biggest pet peeves is that people do not do a very good job of building trees. I can't tell you how many times I've seen a tree where the mother was born after the child or born only a couple of years before the child, so she's not even old enough to be a mother. So those are some of the things I'll be talking about as we go through this. Be prepared to travel when it becomes really possible again. Be prepared to share. and be social. Um, one of the biggest part of being a genealogist is working with other genealogists, working with people who are learning about their family trees, helping them helping me. It's all part of being innovative, where the more information you share, the more knowledge you generate. You also need to be persistent, tenacious, have patience. I am a dog with a bone when it comes to genealogy. Always feel free to ask for help, because I can tell you, every genealogist I've ever met loves to help other people. Sometimes you just have to get lucky. I can tell you a number of times when I've gotten up in the morning and I've looked at new records that were just released, or a new DNA match, which then opened up whole areas of a tree. But the bottom line is, just enjoy yourself. If you're getting into genealogy and you're frustrated and you're angry and you're just not liking it, don't do it. It's all about enjoying yourself. And there's aspects of genealogy that you can take in 100 directions. All right, let's get started. So here is a standard definition for genealogy. Study of ancestry and descent, and it refers to the act of searching for ancestors, with your pedigree being a direct line backward from yourself. Now, you can ask 100 genealogists and you'll get 100 different definitions. If you ask my wife what the definition of genealogy, it is that I prefer to hang out with dead people, which is, I don't know, sometimes easier. So you might ask yourself, who do you want to find? So this might be one of your goals. I have my goal in mind is there's a particular who, and it might be, I just want to find any and all ancestors. I want to have the biggest, best tree possible. And that's a great goal. It might be you want very specific ancestors. I want to know, did my ancestors come over on the Mayflower? Do I have royalty in my blood? Where do I fit into, where do my ancestors fit into World War II, World War I, Civil War, etc.? Maybe in your case, you're adopted, or you have somewhere in your line where there is what they call a non-paternal event or illegitimacy. So maybe your goal is, I need to find my biological parents or biological grandfather, etc. I could go into a long story about how I was able to find, using DNA, my grandmother's biological father. So that was a big thrill for myself and my uncles as I found that information. You may be looking just for, how do you connect to other people in today's world, famous cousins? My niece gets a big kick out of how she's related to this actor or this president or anywhere along that line. Or perhaps what you might want to do is get your second citizenship. And you may need to research an ancestor back to that country of origin. There's a lot of countries that do offer a second citizenship if you can show a paper trail from that person's birth in that country. So it would be birth, marriage, next generation birth, marriage, on and on down to you. And if you can present all of those documents to that board in that country, it's a chance you could get a second citizenship if that's what you were looking for. Sometimes it's not a who you're looking for, but what you want to find. And it might be, I want to know how I'm connected to history. Any flavor of history that you're looking for, whether again be a war or a migration or kings and queens. It might be a historic location. Now, for me, when I think of historic locations, as I research my tree, I keep finding these ancestral homelands or these little villages where my ancestors came from. And I know I've got a bucket list that I want to get to all of them. So so I'm mostly Scottish, even though my last name is Italian. So one of my ancestral villages is a little place outside of Glasgow called Kirkintilloch. And I found my great grandmother on the 1851 census in Scotland, and it also gave an address. So as I'm researching that address, I find a picture for that address. Then, when I had an opportunity to go to Scotland, I did my darndest to find that. So just give me 3 seconds while I queue up. Quick video. So I apologize, the audio on this is just a little off, but here we go.
Like, I'm not sure that we're hearing the sound.
There's a glitch. Mm-hmm.
I apologize if the sound didn't come through. So I'm going to get back to the presentation here. So that was an opportunity for me to visit some place where my ancestors had lived.
Healthcare and Medicare Advantage plans, there's so much to take advantage.
Okay. Maybe you want to find out your ethnicity or nationality. So I lean towards ethnicity because nationalities can be a little time-based. You know, if I think of my Italian ancestry, Italy only really became a nation in 1861. So before that, there was no Italian nationality. So I focus more on ethnicity than nationality. Hang on, there it goes. Maybe you want to find out about your health history, and that's something that you can get either from your DNA or as you are researching your ancestors from their death certificates. Personally, what I'm really focused on these days is I like to solve adoption mysteries. So I help adoptees find their biological parents. My wife has been taking the last few months and she's been collecting some old letters, some old photos and records to build family books. And here's a cover of one of the ones she completed earlier this year. So it really, again, it comes down to what do you want to get out of it? And there are so many avenues, but it may not be about you specifically. Maybe what you really want to do is understand the ancestry of a house. I know a lot of people that will take an old house and they'll research the owners back through time. Or maybe you've got some old photos and you want to try to figure out who's in the photos. And you can combine genealogy with some other aspects to try to figure out who's who in the photo. A lot of times you might run across something like what turns up all the time is like an old family Bible or something that might have a name in it. And maybe you'd like to try to return that artifact to the owner. And I see this a lot where you may want to help a reluctant friend with their ancestry. A lot of times I talk to people, they say, yeah, I'm helping my friend because she's adopted. I'm helping my friend because I like genealogy and they don't, but they'd like to get the answers anyway. And then it comes down to who can do the research versus who really does do the research. And the answer is everybody can. But I find that the 80-20 rule applies, that only about 20% of the population actually really enjoys genealogy or even hearing about genealogy. I have two siblings, and as you can imagine, I love to talk about genealogy. I talk to them, their eyes glaze over a little bit. You know, things I tell them yesterday, they don't remember next week, and they ask me again. And I find that maybe there's one person in every family group that really enjoys it. It might come down to being social versus antisocial. But genealogy can be very social. There are tons of conferences in the past, and there will be again. There are tons of virtual conferences, but you can be antisocial and still do genealogy, do everything from the corner of your house and never leave. There are so many records coming online every day that it's almost a point where gone are the days where you have to go to a special library. And this is again a little tongue-in-cheek, but there's a kind of an exponential curve of interest in genealogy. So as we age, the interest in genealogy goes way up, and it may be us just sensing our mortality. A lot of times when I'm working with people who have been adopted, it's not until they're, say, 50 that they first start thinking about, maybe I should figure out who my parents were. All right, how do you get started? So this is my opinion, and you can take it how you want it and talk to other people, but it's all about the tools. So I'm an engineer and an IT guy, so I think tools, tools, and tools. And I would start with two family tree applications, one online and one on your computer. And the reason I say this is because I don't know whether that online location is going to be in business tomorrow and whether that tree will exist tomorrow. And on the flip side, that tree on my computer, I don't know if my computer is going to act up and the hard drive die tomorrow. So it's a great way to have a backup. Now for me, online and offline, online I use Ancestry. Ancestry has a great tree capability and DNA. Legacy Family Tree is a fairly inexpensive desktop-based software, but there's plenty of each. So as an example, online, Ancestry, MyHeritage, Genie, Family Search. I mentioned these four because they also have a lot of digital records for you to work with. Then for on your desktop, your last laptop, Legacy Family Tree Builder. But here's a whole chart. And if you Googled this, you'd be able to find it also. Desktop genealogy software, and you can see that there's quite a variety of pricing. Family Tree Builder 8 is free. But if you look at the second to last column, there's a sync. So some of these actually work in conjunction with the online. So you may be able to easily synchronize your data from one tree to the other, keep your backup. For example, Family Tree Builder 8, owned by MyHeritage, syncs with MyHeritage, gets hints from MyHeritage. So you might want to pair what you've got. So like I said, I've got Ancestry online, but I've got legacy family tree, which is the third from the bottom, which does not sync, but it's just what I got used to. And I'm okay with manually keeping them in sync by regularly downloading my tree from Ancestry and importing it into the desktop version. But I want to stress that genealogy starts at home. Genealogy starts by talking to your family and I hope you have an opportunity to talk with your oldest generation. And don't be afraid to ask the tough questions. I can't tell you how many times I've said, or I've heard someone else say, if only I had asked them that question before they passed away. It's too late after they're gone. Although through genealogy and DNA, sometimes you can piece together the answers after someone is gone. Now, what do you want to collect as you're doing your, this phase of genealogy, talking to people, is collecting the anecdotes. Now, anecdotes can be laced with truth and myth, but there's always a little bit of truth, and it's worth collecting those anecdotes to start your process. So what do you want to collect? You want to know, when was someone born, the date, the location, married, death, dates, location, who were the parents, and make sure you get the mother's maiden name. Now, I stress these items because you have to have multiple bits, multiple facts in order for you to make a connection from one generation to the next. You can't make a great connection with one fact. I like to have 2, 3, or 4 facts in common as I combine records. But today it's not enough, genealogy of the past was birth, death, marriage, done. But today that's not enough. If you want to really get into the story, or even make sure that the next your children get into the story, you need to enrich the story. You need to make sure that you're including everything between birth and death. Now, what that story is up to you. Maybe you focus more on what your family did for a living, or maybe you focus more on how they died. What you collect to enrich that story is completely up to you, and it's all out there, right down to where they lived, how they lived, whether they went to prison, etc. Now, lots of online tools, and these are valuable, invaluable. These online tools are going to allow you to find the records, save the records, apply the records to your ancestors, apply the records to yourself. You need to collect enough of these records and associate them with an individual so that you've got the right clues to get to the next generation. So as an example, and I find myself falling for this also. The other day I was putting together a tree for someone, and I was actually working from an older generation down. So I knew that the father's name was Nicholas, and I knew that the mother's name was Angela, and I knew that they had a daughter, Rosa. I knew all those things. And as I was researching, I was trying to find a census record to put that family group together. And I found a Nicholas, an Angela, and a Rosa. I said, I got it. I got the last name, I got the first names, I got everything perfect. I wasn't paying attention to the birth dates. I said to myself, oh, birth dates can be a little bit here or there. People lie about their age all the time. But I found the wrong census record completely, and nearly went down the wrong path. I corrected myself within a couple of hours. But even I can make mistakes. Even people with my experience can make mistakes. So it's important that you get the marriage records. Marriage records are great because a lot of times it's the couple getting married, but it could also state their parents. So that's how you might connect 2 generations. Obits are great for listing multiple generations. Death certs should have a spouse's name, parents' names. Birth certificates should have parents' names. Census records are great because they give you family units. Sometimes telephone records, street directories will list a number of people living at the same location. I would even go on to social media like Facebook, where I might find someone who's alive and see who their friends are, and I'll be able to find a generation in one direction or another. You might even find somebody else's tree. And I have a little exclamation there because trees, in my experience, can be all over the place as far as how good or bad they are. So it's a little bit of a trust but verify. In Ancestry, which is where I spend a lot of my time, it will actually try to provide you a hint. So as I'm looking at an individual, and that's me, up in the corner, it says, there's one Ancestry hint associated with this person. And sometimes it'll wiggle and it'll say, hey, you've got hints. So I'll go in and look at the hint, and it's probably just for me, alive, it's probably just a telephone record. Mike had this telephone number in 1986. It actually might be valuable. Who else had that telephone number? So I can do a reverse and say, who else was at that telephone number, and see who was living with Mike at that time. I know, but imagine somebody else. Now, census records are information rich, and just collecting the names is not enough. You actually got to go look at the record itself whenever you have a chance, because inside a census record, you've got whole family units, the extended family. So in that same census record, you might see that in the house right next door, more family. You're going to get their ages, you're going to get their nationalities, you're going to find out their address, what they did for a living, did they own or rent where they're living, married, single, widowed, level of education, and there's more. So census records are huge. In the US, you can go from 1790 to 1940, although from 1790 to 1840, they're just tick marks. You're only going to get the head of household, the number of adults there, and the number of children, but not names. So from 1850 to 1940, they become very valuable. And then, like the holy grail for genealogists, the next census, the 1950s, is coming out in 2 years. We can't wait. So about 8 years ago, the 1940s came out, and it was like so exciting to find my parents on the census for the first time. So your goal right now is to start collecting for that first generation, collect all the records that will allow you to get back a generation, and then repeat the process. Work back a generation, work back a generation, until you get to your goal. Again, make sure you're making solid connections between generations. Make sure the names are the same, make sure the dates, the ages are the same, make sure the locations, etc., so that you've got 2, 3, 4 points of connection before moving on. And you need to understand what's out there for records. Because as you move backwards through time, some records are available and some records are unavailable. As I mentioned, the US Census records go, the most valuable ones go to 1850, they go back to 1790, but before that, you've got to rely on potentially other avenues. You may need to move on to published genealogy. So if you go back to the early last century, the century before, there was lots and lots of published genealogies of individual families. Here's the whole family line of Henry Adams leading to the presidents, etc. So there's tons of books out there. A lot of them are digitized, but I need to stress the importance that take them with a grain of salt. Maybe not that generation of published genealogies, but at least during the late Middle Ages and after that, fake genealogies were bought and sold regularly as people wanted to make it appear that they were connected to royalty. So validate any kind of a published genealogy against other records. You're also going to have to learn about specific websites that have the data that you're looking for. So for every topic you can think of, there's a website. Personally, I spend most of my time on Ancestry and Family Search. They both have lots of records. Sometimes they have the same records. Sometimes they have a nice set of records that go hand in hand. And they're very generic overall. But then if you want specific, you might need to do a Google search for, I need resources for Irish genealogy, resources for Italian genealogy, etc. And then you're going to get page after page after page of additional resources that may take you further. Some of them will be free. Some of them you'll have to pay for. One of my favorite Scottish sites, Find My Ancestors, are one of those. You know, I pay by the record. I have a favorite Irish one, which is free. And then there are limits to even those. So the Scottish one might only go back to the early 1800s. The Irish ones, again, only to the early 1800s. There are certain points in time where the records are missing, destroyed, never kept, etc. So you will hit those kinds of roadblocks, brick walls, which takes me to DNA, which I can use to usually get around any kind of lack of record. So your DNA is going to be key to identifying your ethnicity, your health, if that's what one of your goals is, adoption research, if you need that, non-paternal event, or even confirming the paper records. Now, every DNA company will provide you with an ethnicity, and they're all going to be different. And the reason for that is each DNA company will acquire or create research on particular snippets of your DNA. So they're going to, here's an example. We need to identify the area of DNA that represents Sicilian ancestry. So they'll go to Sicily, they'll try to find a village in Sicily where it's not had a lot of emigration. So it's a pretty cohesive, old Sicilian village, and they'll test everybody. And they'll look for snippets of DNA that are very, very common to everybody in the village. And then they'll use that when they do their ethnicity. They'll be able to say, hey, this person tested and they have that same snippet. We're going to say that they are X% Sicilian. But each DNA company tests a slightly different range of DNA, depending on what they're trying to achieve. So what they test for, they will also then have ethnicity for. And if you've ever done Ancestry, you'll know that Ancestry has changed the ethnicity on people probably about 3 times in the last 5 years. As they've changed the back end of their system, they've needed to change the ethnicity also, or change what they publish for ethnicity. Now, say you want to learn more about your health. 23andMe has been at the forefront of that, but you can also purchase, in addition, health reports from Ancestry and Family Tree DNA. I use another party called Promethease, which is essentially free. and agnostic. So I can take my DNA from any of the companies and run it through Prometheus and get a health report, which is equivalent to any of the other ones. That being said, you could also do very, very specific health checks for very specific instances like breast cancer. Now, I want to talk about DNA and privacy because a lot of people are very concerned about their privacy. And I want you to be aware that companies like Family Tree DNA and a DNA tool called GEDmatch, both of those can be used for law enforcement research. And this is actually something new in the last couple of years. When I first started, there was like a Chinese wall between DNA companies and law enforcement, and never the twain shall meet. But that wall is broken down over the last couple of years. And now within Family Tree and GEDmatch, you can opt in or out of having your DNA as part of a law enforcement research. And here's how that works. Let's say you've opted in and a distant cousin of yours commits a crime and their DNA is collected. Now, a law enforcement researcher can use that collected DNA, match it, or attempt to match it against individuals at Family Tree or GEDmatch, and work their way, puzzle their way down to back to the originator, because they're going to find somebody that's a third cousin, a second cousin, a fourth cousin, a first cousin, and then they'll be able to work their way back to the criminal. And I know how that works. I haven't done it myself, but I know exactly how it works because it's the same techniques that you would use to find the biological parents of an adoptee. You also have to be aware that Ancestry and 23andMe will sell the data anonymously. So your name won't be on it, but your anonymous genetic data will be sold to pharmaceutical companies. For example, 23andMe will sell to GSK. It's in the T's and C's, terms and conditions. You can't opt out. It's either you opt in or don't get tested. Now, this could go either way. No, I have my DNA at Ancestry, and I know they're selling it, and I'm okay with it. Maybe something in my DNA will go towards making a life-saving drug, and I'm okay with that. And there's other reasons I'm okay with that, because there's really no such thing as privacy as we know it. It's gone. In fact, if anyone really wanted to know something about you, they could pretty much find it. I know that in my work, so in my work with adoptees, many times what I'm looking for is the living. And I have to figure out of their biological families, who's still alive, who can I contact? So I can usually get down to the people who are living, where they live, their telephone numbers, their email addresses, their families. It's all out there because as people, well, we don't do a very good job of keeping our data private. So we have to be more careful with our data, where it goes, who has it, what we say in social media, etc. But as far as I'm concerned, my DNA is in 2 or 3 places right now. I know where it is. I know who has access to it. I have opted out of law enforcement research, not because I have anything to be concerned about, but only because I just feel better that way. I still know that if somebody wanted to find me, they could, and I know how. So there's privacy and the lack of it. It doesn't prevent me from having my DNA tested. And I recommend everyone have their DNA tested because there's more benefits than problems. DNA matches where it comes down to, and every DNA match is your cousin or closer, could be a mother, father, sibling. And it comes down to how much DNA does your cousin have? And that's measured in cms or centimorgans. And here's a place where you can go and get a quick understanding of what the relationship is between the amount of DNA, cms, and the relationship. And it's going to give you a chart that looks a little bit like this. And this is something I use probably every day as I'm doing my work with DNA. I might see a cousin match, and I need to try to understand, what is that relationship to the person I'm working with. And you can see that it goes from, there's actually another level at the top, which is like 3,400. 3,400 is parent-child. So this list goes from 2,500 full sibling. You can see the next one down, 1,700 is a range. So 1,700 could be a grandparent, grandchild, aunt, niece, nephew, could even be a half sibling. And in my research, there's an awful lot of halves, half siblings, half uncles, half cousins. One of the things that I notice in building trees, working with people who are building trees, working with people who are adopted or have a non-paternal event, I think one of the statistics is that if you look at your family tree that you built via paper records, digital records, a lot of people might say, well, 1% of that tree could be wrong because there's an error someplace. There was a hidden adoption or a hidden non-paternal event. The father really isn't the father. A lot of people will say it's about 1%. I'm going to tell you, based on my research, my experience, is probably closer to 10%. So if you've got a friend who's got a great looking tree, tell them that 10% of that tree is probably wrong. DNA allows us to get one step closer to the truth because those digital records, they can lie. And I can actually pull up records right now and show you of records where people actually lied on the record. I have a marriage record for my wife's great-grandparents, and they were living in Dedham, Massachusetts, and they were living there probably for, I want to say, 20 years, from 1880 to 1900. In 1900, they go up to Lynn, Massachusetts, and get married. And they state it was their first marriage. They'd already been together for 20 years. She said she's from New York. He says he's from Lynn. I know that they've been living in Dedham. So they were hiding the fact that they hadn't been married for 20 years by lying on their marriage record. So there are plenty of examples. Paper and digital records are only as accurate as the person reporting it. I find most of the errors ever are on death certificates because the person reporting it probably doesn't know everything about the person that died. So they're guessing at how old they were, who their parents were, etc. When you're working with DNA, probably the most important thing as you start looking at the matches, what I'll do is I'll start looking at the names of the people who submitted the matches. I'll look at their trees and I'll start putting together all like surnames. And hopefully your trees aren't full of Smiths and Browns. And they have names that stand out a little bit more. So I start grouping people into names. I start then seeing who's related to each other, and I could create larger family groups. And I might even start figuring out that this group of people are from this country, and this group of people are from this country. So there's another set of groups. And I use these to allow me to build the tree, confirm the tree, identify family in the case of adoptees. Here's a snapshot from Ancestry. And here's another great little tool that they've got. They allow you keep these little markers on each of your matches. And for each of my matches, I will give it a surname that I've been able to fit them into. So I've color coded. For other trees, for other people, I might not be able to necessarily get down to the surnames, but I can get down to a village. So all of these people, I found out that they came from this village in Scotland or this village in Italy. So while I can't quite make all the names come together, all these people had to have been related in some way because they're from this little remote village. I might also mark that I have figured out that, well, these people are from the mother's side of the family. These people are from the father's side of the family. And I can actually, for each person, add multiple markers. So I might say a marker for name, a marker for side of the family, a marker for location, however you want to start organizing and understanding the matches, because the matches are going to be key to building a tree or to validating a tree. So it very quickly, and I'm not going to demonstrate this at all, but what I would do is take two matches with trees, and I'll try to find where they have a common ancestor. So if I've got two matches with a common ancestor, I can 99 times out of 100 say to you that you share that common ancestor also. And maybe that common ancestor is already in your tree, meaning you've just confirmed something, or maybe it's not in your tree, and that allows you to move a generation back, or allows you to understand who a biological ancestor might be. Let's very quickly talk about the future of genealogy. So some people might have seen this whole presentation and say, oh, that's just way too much. I need something simpler. Okay, simpler is coming. At some point in time, maybe even today, you can enter one of these sites, take your DNA, have your DNA test, enter one of these sites, put in your name, and your tree will get automatically created. At Ancestry, they have a process called through lines. And it requires that you have a little bit of your tree. And I've seen this work in a couple of different ways. Working with my son-in-law, I put in just his parents. He had his DNA taken. I put in just his parents. 24 hours later, there are hints showing the rest of his tree. Or if you've got a really good tree, it might then extend it to a 5th generation, 6th generation, 7th generation. The Ancestry version of this through lines is very dependent on DNA plus existing trees, good or bad. So I've also seen it give me hints based on really bad trees. And I immediately say, nope, nope, that's not right. You might be working with 23andMe. In the case of 23andMe, you take your DNA, you put your name in, and it actually builds a tree specifically on DNA and doesn't take into consideration trees. And based on your DNA only and your matches, it can reconstruct a, let's say, generic tree, but of the right proportion. It can say that this person is your second cousin, and this person is your third cousin, and you will have a common ancestor back somewhere in the tree that they've represented. So the future is now. So those things are available right this second, and they're only going to get better. So for those of you who want the potentially easy route, you can use Ancestry, 23andMe, or both. For those of you that don't want to spoil the challenge, you don't have to use those. You can just do the old-fashioned work through all the records and get the details that you're looking for. Okay, I'm running a little over, so I'm going to just finish up with one more slide. Today's genealogy, again, is less about the birth and death, and it's about storytelling. It's about the story you want to tell, and the online sites understand that, and they're getting into the mode of helping you tell your story. And when I talk to my nieces and nephews, they want to know the drama. You know, it's like a reality TV show for them. They want to know the drama and the hardships, and they want to know who died, how they died, who was in war. Ancestry will actually help you start building the story. They'll put all the records into story form and try to lay it out for you. All right, so that's it. That is a very high level about how to start researching your genealogy. So I'm going to turn it over to Ashley to read out some of the questions. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Yeah, and if anyone has any questions, please feel free to drop them in the group chat and I can read them out. Folks, a few minutes to type them in. Actually, I have a question for you while you folks are typing. Can
You bet.
you explain the difference? What is a first cousin once removed versus second cousins?
Okay, so easy one. First cousin once removed. Think of your aunt or uncle's child. So that would be your first cousin. Now, if you go back to your grandfather's sibling, and you go down to your grandfather's sibling's grandchild would be your second cousin. So there's you know 2 generations removed from above. Now, once removed, so I'll take my father and his first cousin. Me to my father's first cousin, so my father and his first cousin are first cousins. I'm once one generation. I'm once removed from my father's first cousin. So when they talk about once removed, it's usually the separation of generations.
Great, makes sense. All right. So do you only work with adoptees or do you help anyone with their ancestry?
I have helped anyone and everyone on every aspect. So I'm happy to help. I do almost everything pro bono because I just love doing it. I especially love the challenge of adoptee work and non-paternal event work because it becomes a mystery. It becomes a mystery that I solve. But that being said, you know, a lot of times just building a tree is uncovering a mystery.
Next question. Are there any specific resources for African-American or Native Americans?
There are, but few and far between. So you'd have to do a specific Google search on resources for African American genealogy. One of the things that I have found is that, you know, the records are very poor pre-Civil War for obvious reasons. But what a lot of African Americans have been doing is they will take DNA and DNA tests, and then they'll be able to get back uniquely to the African area, country of origin, which might then help them work from the past forward.
And can you explain how Scotland's people works?
So if I go on Scotland's people, and I think there's a variety of things with the same name, like UK people, Scotland people. If you go there, you can put in a search, and you can narrow the search by names, dates, marriage records, death records, and it's going to give you a rough list with maybe a couple of hints of all the records that they have. Now, if you want to actually look at that record, then you pay. So what I will do is I will buy a block of credits. So I might buy 100 credits, and then every record I have to look at is 6 credits or something to that effect. So what I usually do is I will try to do my best to narrow down the records before actually looking at them. So if I'm looking at a birth record, I'll have the name and at least one of the parents' names in the listing and a date, and maybe even a location. And I'm going to say, well, there's a 50-50 chance that that is the Alexander that I'm looking for. And then I'll pay the money. I'll use up my credit to look at the record where there'll be even more information, which may prove or disprove that it's the record I'm actually looking for. So it's a good money-making process for Scotland or whoever owns the records over there, because you're bound to click on and pay for more records than you actually want to see. What I'll do to help me is if I use family search, there are some elements of the same information on family search. So I might narrow down the records on family search first, and then when I get to Scotland's people, I'm picking the right one and not paying more than I should.
Great. So do you have any tips on how to get records from countries when you don't speak the language?
Only bad tips. So there's always going to be a genealogist in the country that you're looking to research in. You may want to pay someone. Be careful. The records may not really exist and they'll want their money anyway. I had a friend tell me that somebody wanted $5,000 to do some research in Turkey. And I said to him, don't spend it. The records probably don't exist. So what I've had to do is rely on records that have been digitized and learn the languages. So my Italian's getting really good as I've been working through Italian records. So like I said, all bad advice, sorry.
Well, hey, you're gaining a new skill while you do it.
Yeah.
And then one last question, since we're almost at our time, do you have any experience in researching ancestry on Armenians from Turkey?
Yes. My wife is Armenian, so yes, I have been doing it. Again, that was the same question as the cousin who was asked to pay $5,000 for Turkey. I told him don't bother. The records probably don't exist. They were probably destroyed either in 1909 or 1915 after the genocides. So a lot of what we're doing is only based on DNA. So we're finding Armenian family through DNA, and then talking with them and learning their stories. Because one thing I have found is that the Armenian families have kept their stories and passed down their stories. And it's our only link to that past, unfortunately.
Great. Well, thank you so much. Those are all the questions and we are out of time. So I just want to thank everyone for joining us and thank you so much for presenting today.
You got it.